Hello again, and welcome to Goatee with Georgia D. It always makes me want to laugh, actually, when I say that, because when I was changing the name, actually my brother-in-law and my husband and my cousin-in-law, I guess you could say, were always saying, you should call it Georgia D, come talk with me, in a southern accent. And I thought, that might be a fun, it might be fun to call the podcast that, but, you can't always tell that it's in a southern accent, just by looking at the podcast. You might not be able to tell that I'm meaning for it to be in a southern accent, so I just ended up going with Goatee, as you know, because I want it to be lots of different things that we talk about. And today I wanted to talk about how Caleb and I have moved from Texas to South Dakota, and talk a little bit about that and how the Lord orchestrated that, and kind of tell the story, because I really felt like that was a really big instrumental thing that has happened to us recently, and I just wanted to tell the story. So, we have been living in Texas for a few years recently, and that's where we met, and we went to ministry school there, and we met and worked together and fell in love, and so we've been in Texas for quite a while, and our lease was up at the end of May, and I was still currently in the ministry school, and Caleb was working. And there was just this time, a couple months before we actually had to leave our apartment. Our lease would be up. They wanted to know 60 days in advance, are you going to be redoing your lease, or are you going to be, are you going to re-sign your lease for another year, or are you going to leave? And we had not heard the Lord, and we were waiting. And so when the time came 60 days before the apartment, we had to tell them. We ended up just saying, we're going to leave, because we didn't tell them this, but we knew, because the Lord hadn't told us what we were doing, if we were leaving Texas or if we were going somewhere else. So we just told our apartment, we're going to leave. So we did that, and then, we were waiting on the Lord as to what we were going to do, and we hadn't really heard anything for a really long time, and I'm not exactly sure when we knew, but we just didn't really hear anything yet from the Lord, so we just didn't know that we should be leaving, or didn't know, so we figured we needed to find a new apartment, because the apartment we were at, they told us was already being leased. So we looked at a few other apartments within our apartment complex, and those just weren't suited for our situation at the moment. As some of you know, we are expecting a baby, so we were wanting another room to have two bedrooms, and that just, a lot of the apartments weren't working out, and because of the housing market going up, the apartment people can't afford housing currently because it's so expensive. So then naturally the apartment has influxed as well in pricing and people wanting to move into apartments because people aren't able to afford housing so as much. And so we were having a really hard time finding an apartment after we had left our apartment. So then we went to look at other apartments. We found like a really nice big apartment that was a lot more expensive. Like it was like $1,700, for that kind of an apartment, and we were only paying $1,000 for our 1-bedroom apartment, and that was great for us and for our season. And me going through ministry school and him working, and so we found this one, and it was on a day where, as me being pregnant, I was extremely hungry, and I actually had a really bad hormonal headache from being pregnant, and he, I think, had a headache, and he was extremely hungry and extremely tired, and we were both exhausted from the day, and but so we ended up looking at this apartment. It was way bigger and a lot more expensive than we were paying before. And so, but we had signed the lease because they said that it would have been taken the next day, so we had paid some of the fees and went through it. And I didn't really know that I really had peace. I think we just went with it. Caleb had peace at the time, and then the next day we woke up and we were just not at peace about it. Both of us, we were just not sure that we did the right thing. And so then fast forward, to a couple weeks before we needed to move out, the day that we needed to move out, let's say that, on May 25th of 2021, we moved out of our apartment, and we had people helping us. We moved out and we finished. It took all day. Then we had to clean, and we brought all of our things to the new apartment. And the hard part about our situation was we had to move out on May 25th, but we weren't going to be able to move in until June 8th of 2021. And so we had to move our U-Haul right all the way over to the apartment and park it. And so we did that, and then we went back to our apartment to give our keys to the front desk managers. And so we thanked them and told them we wish we could have stayed. We would have, were we able to. And also, a few weeks before we had to move out, we called and several times the front desk to ask, okay, is our room leased? We would like to move in. And they kept saying, yes, it's leased. You have to leave. And because, 2 months prior, we didn't know, and we said we were leaving, but then we felt like the Lord was saying it's okay, you can stay, or we didn't know, we didn't have direction, so we just knew we were supposed to stay because we didn't really have very much direction, and so we just felt peace to stay. And so we, handed her the keys and said we wished we could have stayed, and she said, well, your apartment isn't actually being leased. And we were like, what? And my heart dropped, and his heart dropped, and we had asked so many times in advance, like, is it leased or is it? And they kept saying it was, but we had never talked to the head manager. And this was the head manager now that we were giving our keys to. And so we were like, oh my gosh, what in the world? Like, we could have stayed in this apartment. And mind you, it was going to be very inconvenient in our new apartment because it was a lot more money. I would have had to work after the baby was born and work really hard up until the baby was born. And I did not have a work from home job, and it would have put stress on both of us. And there was just a lot of complications with the new apartment, although it was very nice, and it would have suited our living arrangements and lots of room, and if people wanted to come visit, it was a 2-bedroom apartment type of thing. So there was a lot of good things about it, but it was just a lot more than we wanted to spend because we wanted me to be able to be home with the baby. So there's that. So we were just devastated actually when we found out that we could stay in our apartment. And so we then talked to her. We're like, they told us we couldn't move in, and she's like, oh no, it's not leased. And so anyways, we went to dinner at a family friend's house after that, and we were just so upset, and we could barely get our mind off of what she had just told us, because we had just, some of the family friends we were visiting had just spent the whole day helping us pack the whole, pack up the U-Haul and move it, and it was just a lot of work, and it was extremely hot in the middle of the summer in Texas, and there was just a lot going on, and it was very emotional and all that. So anyways, we kind of thought it over, and I talked with Caleb's mom and my mom, and they both encouraged us, me to call and see if we could cancel our one apartment, the new apartment, and then get back in with our old apartment. And so I talked to Caleb about it, and we really were like, maybe we should just try to do this, even though we had signed the lease for our new apartment, even though we weren't going to move in for another 2 weeks, So the next day I felt, I was to do that. So the next day I called the new apartment, and I went in to see her, and she said, yeah, you can, I asked her, this is the situation, and we wished we could have stayed in this apartment, and she said, man, yeah, definitely, you guys can move in right away, I'll switch some things around, and you guys can move in today. And I thought, I'm going to start moving in immediately, moving everything back into our original apartment that we were staying in for the past year. And so then I call the new apartment, and I cancel with them, and there was no repercussions or anything. Thankfully, I thought there was maybe I was very nervous about that. But there were no repercussions or anything, and so we were able to cancel. And so then about a couple minutes later, I got home. I canceled with the lady at the new apartment, and then I got home and I was talking to a friend. We were staying with a couple and then 3 other girls. They all lived in this one house they were all going to the ministry school Caleb and I were a part of. And so we were all just, I walked out of our car, and my friend was sitting on the doorstep, just stretching after she had worked out, and we were just talking, and all of a sudden the apartment complex that we had been living in called me, and they said, the first thing she said was, Georgia, don't cancel your new apartment. I found out that actually your apartment is being leased. And I said, and I was just shocked. I almost couldn't even talk. I was just like in shock and awe. And I was like, oh my gosh, I already canceled it, and there were people on the waiting list for this apartment, and it's very hard to find a new apartment. Like she knew how hard it was to find an apartment, and people were picking them up. Like you couldn't hardly find open apartments or apartments to lease. So, and we had already paid, a big fee, to reserve this apartment and go through all the hassle and the application fee and all of that. And we were just out of that money, but we weren't going to have any penalty or anything. So besides losing the money that we had put in. And so then she said, well, let me see what I can do. So she had called her manager to see if there were any rooms open or any apartments open in the complex, and she called back and said that there was one open, and we knew the people that lived in that apartment before, so it was going to be more expensive than our apartment we were staying in, but the same amount of space and literally the same layout. It was just on the first floor where we were on the second floor. So there was carpeting and it was cheaper to be on the second floor, whereas this apartment that they were going to put us in was more expensive, but the same amount of space and on the first floor, which the first floor would have been good to move back into, not having to bring up everything up the stairs, but still super inconvenient, and we didn't want to pay more, you know. It would have been easier, it would have been easier to move back in, but, you know, we were having a baby. We kind of wanted carpet too on some level, although the hardwood floor would have been nice, but for some reason Caleb just, at this point Caleb didn't know, and so I was like, well, let me just hold off, let me go call my husband and I will get back to you. And she's like, oh, no worries, that's okay, call me back. So I called Caleb and I told him the whole situation that I just told you, that he, you know how we canceled our apartment. She told us we could move in, and then I canceled the new apartment that we signed up for, and then found out, it's not, it's actually leased. And then I also told him about the new apartment that she was suggesting. And I think that one was going to be swooped up very quickly as well. And so he was just like, well, let's just wait. We need to wait before we do anything. We've made a few rash decisions. We got the first apartment, the newer apartment with the 2 bedrooms, very quickly. We signed that lease, and then weren't really sure, and then we canceled it, and we tried to get into this original apartment, and then that didn't work out. Things were just falling apart, and we just weren't, things just weren't kind of coming together. So we just were like, well, maybe, and I think I was just a little exasperated, and I was a little frustrated, probably hormonal from pregnancy, and I was like, well, maybe this is the Lord moving us north, maybe this is our time to move out of Texas. And he said, well, maybe, and it kind of caught him off guard, and caught me off guard that I even said it. And so, we were like, well, let's just wait, and let's take a day, let's think about it, or take the weekend. That's what he said. It was Friday, and so we took the entire weekend to think about it. And at first I was thinking, I wanted to stay in Texas. I wanted to, we had really good insurance with Caleb's job, and I wanted to not have to move in the middle of pregnancy, and I was feeling peace about just staying, and I was really pushing for staying, and he wasn't really saying anything, but I was very much leaning towards staying in Texas. And then by the end of the weekend, we had talked to Caleb's mom and to my mom, and there were lots of different opportunities that had popped up for both of us in both areas, of the country where they live. And it just ended up working out that there was a job opportunity for Caleb and I in South Dakota, and a place to live, and with the ministry that his parents were a part of, and just so many things just kind of fell together in that department, and I was starting to feel peace about, moving to South Dakota, and so I did not know this. So by the end of the weekend, I told him, I do feel peace to go to move to South Dakota, and he was pretty relieved because he was already feeling that. So now, to rewind a little bit, he had had a dream the morning all of that chaos happened. So that morning, and he had not told me the dream at all until the end of the weekend. So that morning, on Friday morning, before all of this happened, he had had a dream. And to like a little synopsis of the dream, he was with some family, close family, and they were walking around in a field, and all of a sudden there was a tornadoes coming. Lots of different tornadoes, and so he had found these two big rocks, and so he went to lay down between the rocks, and he was calling his family over to come and lay down in the rocks. And the only thing that was running through his mind as he woke up was between the cleft and the rock, between the cleft and the rock, and that just kept running through his mind. And he actually looked up in scripture where the Lord talks about that. Now, it's been a little while since we talked about it, or since we've told this story, but essentially, so forgive me if I mix this up a little bit, but essentially, there's this part where Caleb had been looking over the scripture where it talks about this, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but basically the Lord is talking to Abraham, and Abraham is like thinking about where he the Lord is trying to give him direction, and he's just not knowing what to do. And Abraham said, well, I'll go wherever your presence is. Like, I don't want to go anywhere unless your presence is there. And basically like giving him peace. Like, I don't want to go anywhere unless you are there and if your presence is there. And so he had felt that this dream was exactly because he was trying to figure out the dream. And so it was only after I had called him that he found, I had mentioned. So it was right before I called, he was looking at the scriptures, trying to figure out where it was and what the Lord was talking about between the cleft and the rock. And so then I called and told him that whole story. And basically that was the tornadoes, and coming were everything falling apart. And then between the cleft and the rock, and so it talks about like that basically he saw as he looked up at the scripture once we got off the phone, that where Abraham says, like, I'm not going to go unless your presence is there. And he was feeling peace that it was time to go in that moment. And over the weekend, the Lord said to him, like, my presence will be there and I will go before you in the land of your people. And so that was kind of a confirmation. That was a confirmation big time for him. And I didn't know that he had experienced that in that moment until the end of the weekend. He said he wanted me to have peace before he would reveal, what he was feeling. And so I know there is a little bit more that I'm not actually covering in that, but for the most part, you understand. And so anyways, we ended up deciding we were going to leave. So there was a little bit of a hold up. So we had decided we were going to leave around that time. And that was after a week of already being in, living at somebody else's house and having our U-Haul, paying for the U-Haul for a week with all of our stuff just sitting, in a parking lot in a U-Haul. And so we decided we had to tell our jobs immediately, that we needed the 2-week notice. And so we told them. And so that was mainly the biggest holdup, that we had to wait for 2 weeks, you know. And the one of the couple that we were staying with, they had said, well, why don't you put all of your stuff in the U-Haul? Why don't you take all of that and put it in our garage and get rid of your U-Haul? And then, because we were going to have to refill the U-Haul with a new U-Haul, because we had bought a U-Haul or rented a U-Haul that was only a local in Texas, you know, a local U-Haul. And we didn't know that there were, you know, nationwide U-Hauls, and that there were only local U-Hauls. So we had filled up a local U-Haul. So another problem presented itself, but he had suggested, well, why don't you just empty all your stuff in our garage, and then we will, you know, you can go get your new U-Haul when it's time to move, and we'll help you pack it back up. And at first that just felt like such a huge deal, like unpack it. Like it took so long for us to, you know, pack it up in general. It took all day for us to pack it up and to move it out. And, you know, granted, we were going up and down stairs and moving it a lot farther distance, and we were going to back it right up into the garage and then move it in. So we went and got our U-Haul, and we backed it in, and we emptied it out, me and 2 other of the people that were living in the house, and we emptied it in about an hour and a half, and that was amazing that we had done that. And my husband was at work the entire time and didn't even have to do a thing, so that was such a blessing that they helped us with that. And the Lord just really provided the right people and the right situation for that. And so then we waited another 2 weeks, and we worked, and then it was time to move. And so we repacked the U-Haul, and we had some more help with that. That was a big deal, you know. That took a lot longer, but it worked out. And then we moved, you know, on June 11th. Caleb's brother had come down and helped us, you know, travel and drive all the 20 some hours it took to get here. And we had spent one night in a hotel, and so that was a fun experience, you know, the big drive out here. And then since then we lived with Caleb's parents for 2.5 months. And that transition, you know, if you know, living with someone else's family can be challenging and difficult than living with like your parents-in-law. And that's different. Like, they're just, people are different. Like, you grew up, it's a different family than the family you grew up in, and so things are different, and there's an adjustment. And plus being pregnant and newly married, there's just a lot of factors there. And that was difficult, and that was challenging, but also really good, and really growing for both of us. And it helped us really learn how to communicate as a couple. And I know that the Lord was with us the entire time. So we did that for 2.5 months. I spent a lot of time outside, a lot of time walking. I was walking 5 miles a day, and I was mostly in my second trimester, so I had a lot of energy, and I didn't have to take any naps or anything, so that was really good for me. But it was also extremely emotional throughout that time for both of us, and mostly for me. And but it was so good as well. And then we moved into a room in the ministry center that we're a part of. That's a huge building, and we are using just a little room, and most of our stuff is in storage at the moment. But currently we are fixing up our new house that we're going to be living in. It's just a 3-bedroom house, but we are currently not completely remodeling, but we're doing a lot of remodeling to the house, some different new floors and new carpets, and painting a lot of everything. We're painting everything, and lots of new light fixtures and new backsplashes and lots of really cool things. And I'm making actually a YouTube vlog about that. So you can definitely check that out, and I'll talk more about that. And also, I'm planning on possibly doing like a moving vlog, so you can check that out too at the Esther Effect. That will be really fun to kind of see how our house, comes together. And it will be a long time coming. We will have spent 6 months without a house. So that's kind of a big deal while you're pregnant. 6 months out of the 9 months of being pregnant with no house, no place to nest. And it's so funny. We went and got gelato the other day, and the barista was asking what kind of gelato I specifically wanted, and I said I wanted like s'mores and chocolate. And I said, because they go together. And she said, oh, I can really tell that you're nesting. And I said, well, I actually haven't had the opportunity to nest yet, but I will be soon. And she says, well, I can see you're taking it out on your ice cream, and I just thought that was so funny, because I haven't had an opportunity to nest, and so I'm really excited about that, and to put things, just to make a home, and prepare for baby, and prepare our hearts for this completely brand new season that the Lord is bringing us into. And but yeah, so I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I just wanted to do a life update with you, for you, and just share that story with you. And I'm excited to share more. If you are thinking, oh, I want to hear you talk about this, or you have questions about this, or whatever it is, relationships advice, or about the Holy Spirit, or about Jesus, or just anything that popped up in your mind during this time, I would love to talk about it or answer any questions, or if you have a topic that you want me to talk about, either here or mostly here, you can go to @GoTGD on Twitter and DM and message me there, or you can go to GeorgiaMorph _ on Instagram, and I can and just message me there, and I will love to talk about any topics that you're thinking, or questions, or answer anything. But in the meantime, I will see you next time, and thanks for listening.